Welcome to Mythic Slumber, your sanctuary for adult sleep stories. Tonight, we leave the world behind, crossing centuries to a cold frontier where the greatest empire on earth holds its line. We're here to find a quiet space beside a modest fire, inside the leather tent of a man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, yet sought only the peace of a disciplined mind. We will sit with the emperor, listen to the rhythm of his stylus on wax, and find safety in the shadow of his watch. Before we cross the river, leave a light behind for those who follow this path, a like, a subscription. Small offerings, but they keep this fire burning. The sky above the Danube River holds the last light of the day. It is a deep, bruised purple bleeding into a heavy, dull orange along the western horizon. The water of the great river moves with a slow, dark momentum. It is a heavy river, carrying the freezing meltwater of the northern mountains down through the ancient forests. The wind that blows off the surface is biting and raw. It carries the sharp scent of damp earth, crushed pine needles, and the deep, cold mud of the riverbank. Winter rests just beyond the tree line, waiting in the shadows of the frontier. The world outside is vast, indifferent, and wild, but there is a boundary here, a line drawn against the wilderness. The path rises from the rocky shore, leading up a gentle incline toward a sprawling plateau. The frost crunches softly underfoot. The earth is hardening as the temperature drops. Ahead, silhouetted against the fading orange light, rises the wooden palisade of the Roman encampment. It is a fortress of timber and earth, built with absolute precision. The chaos of the forest stops at the edge of the cleared ground. From the tree line to the wooden walls there is nothing but open space, offering no place for the shadows to hide. A deep trench surrounds the perimeter. Above the trench, the heavy wooden stakes of the wall stand shoulder to shoulder, forming an unbroken barrier. Watchtowers rise at measured intervals. Inside those towers, sentries stand in heavy woolen cloaks. They do not shout. They do not pace frantically. They stand with the quiet, immovable discipline of the greatest military force on earth. Their presence is a silent guarantee. The night may belong to the wild, but this camp belongs to Rome. The heavy wooden gates are open, allowing the last of the patrols to return. Walking through these gates, the world divides. The biting wind of the river is suddenly broken by the high walls and the dense grid of structures within. The camp is a marvel of order. It is laid out in perfect right angles, a grid of streets and avenues that impose reason upon the untamed earth. Every tent, every fire, every pathway has a specific designated place. There is no confusion here. There is only structure. This predictability brings a profound sense of calm. Here, everything is exactly where it is supposed to be. Everything is exactly where it is supposed to be. Rows and rows of heavy leather tents stretch out into the dusk. They are crafted from thick calfskin, or oiled to repel the rain and the snow. The leather gives the air a distinct, comforting scent, mingling with the wood smoke that begins to rise from the hundreds of small campfires. The day's march is over. The legions are settling in for the night. The sounds of the camp are a low rhythmic hum of domestic military life. There is no clashing of swords. There are no alarms. There is the muffled thud of a wooden mallet driving a tent peg deeper into the soil. There is the steady, repetitive grinding of hand mills as soldiers crush their grain rations for the evening meal. The low murmur of deep voices drifts between the tents, speaking in measured, tired tones. The air smells of roasting barley, oak wood smoke, and the faint metallic tang of oiled iron. Down the rows, the horses of the cavalry are tethered for the night. They snort softly in the cold air, their breath rising in thick white plumes. You can hear the gentle tearing of hay as they eat, and the occasional heavy stamp of a hoof on the packed dirt. These are the sounds of an army at rest, an army that has secured its perimeter and found its peace for the night. A centurion walks ahead, leading the way down the main thoroughfare. His boots fall in a steady, unhurried rhythm. His armour clinks softly with each step, a dull, metallic chime that blends with the ambient noise of the camp. He does not need to speak. His path is straight and deliberate. The deeper you walk into the camp, the more insulated you feel from the frontier outside. The palisade walls block the view of the dark forest. The rows of leather tents block the biting wind. The smoke from the fires gathers overhead, creating a warm, hazy canopy that holds the heat close to the ground. The sky above has turned from purple to a deep, inky black. The first stars are beginning to show, pale and distant in the cold air, but down here, between the tents, the light is warm and amber. Small braziers glow with red coals. The shadows cast by the fires dance slowly against the heavy leather walls. The eagle standards of the legions are planted firmly in the ground outside the commanding officer's quarters. They stand tall and still, silhouetted against the firelight. They are symbols of endurance, symbols of a structure that has outlasted generations. The walk continues toward the very centre of the camp. This is the praetorium, the heart of the grid. Here the density of the tents thins out slightly. The fires burn a little steadier. The guards stand a little closer together. But there is no grand display of wealth or power. There are no marble columns brought from the capital. There are no silken banners snapping in the wind. The centre of the camp looks very much like the rest of the camp. It is austere, it is functional, it is grounded in the reality of the frontier. The centurion stops. He turns and gestures toward a tent set slightly apart from the others. It is larger than the soldiers' quarters, but it is still made of the same heavy oiled leather. It is weathered, bearing the marks of many seasons on the borders of the empire. The wind presses against the thick fabric, but the tent does not yield. It is a shelter built for endurance. A soft golden light spills from beneath the heavy entrance flap. The scent of burning oak is stronger here, warm and inviting. The long journey from Rome is over. The cold miles of the northern road are behind. The vast dark wilderness has been shut out by the wooden walls and the watchful eyes of the sentries. There is nothing left to travel. There is nothing left to carry. The destination has been reached. Before we step inside, leave a light in the dark, a like if this fire has found you. The Praetorian Guard steps aside. His movement is slow, deliberate, and entirely silent. He reaches out with a heavy, armoured hand and pulls back the thick leather flap of the tent. A rush of warm air escapes from the opening. It washes over the cold face and the frozen hands. It carries the deep, rich scent of burning oak and melting beeswax. The step is taken across the threshold. The heavy leather flap falls shut behind. The sound of the closure is a thick, muffled thud. In an instant, the world changes. The biting, relentless wind of the Danube River is completely severed. Its sharp, aggressive howl is instantly reduced to a low, distant murmur. It becomes a harmless hum, pressing against the outside of the thick calfskin walls, unable to find a way in. The cold is left outside, trapped in the dark forest and the freezing mud. Inside, the air is thick, still, and heavy with warmth. The transition brings a physical wave of profound relief. The tension carried in the shoulders begins to melt. The stiffness in the hands slowly unwinds. the ache in the bones, settled there by miles of frozen roads, begins to fade. It is the absolute comfort of finding a true sanctuary after a long and exhausting journey. The light in the tent is soft and amber. It does not blind. It doesn't demand attention. It is cast by a single iron brazier sitting in the centre of the hard-packed earth floor. The brazier is simple, resting on 3 sturdy legs. The iron is dark, forged in the armories of Rome, now resting quietly on the soil of the frontier. Inside it, a mound of oak coals glows with a deep, steady red heat. The coals pulse slowly. They brighten slightly when a faint draught shifts the air, then settle back into a slow, rhythmic burn. They do not crackle with the chaotic, unpredictable energy of a new fire. They burn with the quiet, enduring strength of embers that have been tended with care for hours. The smoke is thin and fragrant, rising straight up toward a small ventilation opening at the peak of the tent. The scent of the smoke mixes with the smell of the oiled leather walls. It is an earthy, grounded scent. It speaks of shelter. It speaks of survival made comfortable through discipline, preparation, and order. Looking around the space, the eyes adjust to the soft, dancing shadows. This is the centre of the known world. This is the command tent of the Emperor of Rome. A traveller might expect to find the spoils of endless conquest here. They might expect to see looted gold, heavy tapestries of crimson silk and marble statues carried at great expense from the capital. They might expect the overwhelming, exhausting display of absolute power, but there is no gold here. There is no marble. There is no silk. The tent is shockingly austere. It is simply the tent of a soldier, only slightly larger to accommodate a few wooden tables. The furnishings are sparse and strictly functional. In the corner rests a simple wooden cot, built with straight, unadorned lines of pale timber. It is covered not with purple-dyed linen, but with heavy, undyed wool blankets and the thick, dark fur of a bear. The fur looks dense and incredibly warm, designed to keep the freezing northern nights at bay. It is a reminder of the wild nature that surrounds the camp. Ye are now subdued and repurposed for comfort. The blankets are heavy, woven for utility rather than beauty. They promise a dreamless, heavy sleep free from the chill of the earth. Nearby sits a folding wooden stool, the sella castrensis, its leather seat worn smooth and dark from years of use. Against the far wall rests a heavy wooden chest, bound in dark iron, holding the dispatches and maps of an empire. Everything in the room has a purpose. Everything is necessary. There is no clutter to distract the mind. There is no excess to weigh down the spirit. This visual austerity brings a deep, unexpected sense of peace. This modest leather tent asks nothing of you. The space does not demand awe. It only offers quiet. It is a perfect reflection of the mind that occupies it. A mind that has stripped away the unnecessary illusions of the world, leaving only what is real, solid, and true. The realization settles in that this is the safest place on the continent. Outside, thousands of elite soldiers stand watch in the freezing dark. They form a shield of iron as discipline around this very spot. No harm can cross the palisade. No danger can navigate the precise grid of the camp. The chaos of the frontier is entirely locked out. The walls of the tent, though made only of leather, feel thicker and more protective than the stone walls of a high fortress. They enclose a space of absolute, unbreakable security. The warmth of the brazier continues to radiate outward in slow, steady waves. It thaws the last of the winter chill from the body. The shadows on the curved walls dance slowly, moving with the gentle pulse of the embers. There's a small wooden table situated near the fire. There's position to catch the best of the amber light. The surface of the table is covered with a few simple items: a clay jug of fresh water, a small unadorned cup of bronze, several scrolls of parchment rolled tight and tied with plain leather cords, and a pair of wooden tablets hinged together and filled with dark, smooth beeswax. Seated at the table is a figure. He's bathed in the warm, flickering light of the coals. He wears a simple tunic of undyed wool, thick and practical against the northern cold. Over his shoulders is draped a heavy military cloak. It is not the bright, pristine royal purple of the ceremonies in Rome. It is a faded, dark crimson, stained with the dust of the road and the mud of 100 different camps. It is the cloak of a man who has lived out of doors for years. He is an older man. His hair is greying, eerie and curling slightly around his ears. His beard is thick and equally grey, untrimmed, resembling the beard of a philosopher rather than a politician. His face is deeply lined in the firelight. The lines are carved by years of carrying the heaviest burden a human being can bear. They are the marks of endless decisions, of sleepless nights, of watching friends fall and seasons change on hostile borders. It is a face of profound, exhausted kindness. He sits very still. His posture is not rigid, but it is not slumped. It is the posture of a man who has learned to support his own weight, emotionally and physically. His hands are weathered, marked by the reins of horses and the harsh sun of a dozen different provinces. Yet they rest on the table with a calm, practiced precision. He holds a small bronze stylus in his right hand. The stylus is a simple tool, sharp on one end for writing in the wax, flat on the other for erasing and smoothing over. He's looking down at the tablet resting on the wood. He does not immediately look up. He's caught in a thought, turning it over in his mind with the same deliberate care as a jeweller examining a stone in the light. The silence in the tent is thick and incredibly comfortable. It is not an awkward silence that demands to be broken or filled with chatter. It is a shared quiet. It is the quiet of two people who understand that words are often unnecessary when the fire is warm and the night is cold. The only sounds are the steady, low hum of the wind pressing against the outside of the leather walls, and the occasional soft crackle of an oak ember shifting as it burns down in the iron brazier. The breathing of the man at the table is slow and measured. It sets a rhythm for the room. It is a slow, steady tide of air, moving in and out with perfect, unhurried regularity. It is a deeply calming rhythm. It draws the breath down to match its slow, steady pace. The air in the tent feels heavier now, pressing down gently on the eyelids. The sheer relief of the warmth, combined with the absolute safety of the camp, begins to melt away the sharp edges of consciousness. There is nowhere else to be. There is no road left to travel tonight. There are no duties left to fulfill. The world outside the leather walls has ceased to matter. The Empire can wait until the sun returns. The freezing Danube can flow on in the dark, uncared for and unseen. The wild forests can keep their cold secrets. Here, all, in this small pocket of warmth and amber light, there is only the present moment. There is only the heat of the coals, the sweet smell of the beeswax, and the steady, protective presence of the philosopher king. He shifts slightly in his wooden chair. The leather seat creaks, a soft, natural sound. He raises the bronze stylus. He touches the sharp point to the dark, smooth surface of the wax. A sound begins. Scratch. It is a small, focused sound. Scratch. The carving of a letter into the soft wax. It is a steady, deliberate noise. It anchors the mind, pulling it away from any lingering, wandering thoughts. It focuses all attention on the simple, physical act of writing. He continues to write, entirely absorbed in the task of translating the discipline of his mind into the physical world. He's creating order out of the chaos of his thoughts, just as the camp outside creates order out of the wilderness. The presence of this man is a shield, his wisdom is a fortress. The mind can finally lay down its defences, knowing that the most disciplined intellect in history is keeping watch. If this fire has kept you warm tonight, stay. Subscribe, and the sanctuary will be here whenever the night grows long. The sound of the stylus fills the quiet space of the tent. It is a rhythmic metallic scrape against a soft, yielding surface. The sharp point of the bronze tool parts the dark beeswax of the writing tablet. The sound is constant and entirely deliberate. There is no rush in the movement of the hand. There is only a steady, measured translation of thought into physical form. The scratching sound becomes an anchor in the heavy air. It replaces the wandering, restless noise of the outside world. It pushes away the memory of the frozen roads and the biting northern wind. The mind attaches to the slow, repeating rhythm of the bronze on the wax. A line is drawn. A word is formed. A pause follows, filled only by the low crackle of the oak embers in the iron brazier. Then the scratching begins again. The older man with the greying beard does not look up. He's entirely absorbed in the small wooden tablet resting on his knees. His head is bowed slightly, catching the amber light of the fire on his weathered brow. He wears the heavy responsibilities of an empire. But in this moment, his universe is reduced to a square of wax. The heavy wool of his dark crimson cloak absorbs the shadows of the room. His shoulders rise and fall with a slow, even breath. It is the breathing of a man who has learned to govern his own internal rhythm, regardless of the chaos beyond the leather walls. The camp outside is a distant reality. The thousands of soldiers, the horses, the wooden palisade, the endless dark forests of the frontier. All of it feels miles away, locked out by the thick calfskin of the tent. The wind presses against the outside of the shelter. The heavy fabric shifts slightly, yielding to the pressure, but it does not break. The wind cannot reach the centre of the room. It cannot disturb the slow, steady burn of the coals. The Emperor Marcus Aurelius continues to write. His hand is scarred and hardened by years of gripping the reins of a horse in the freezing rain. The veins stand out against the pale skin, catching the firelight. Yet the fingers hold the small bronze stylus with incredible lightness. There's no tension in his grip. He does not force the words into the wax. He guides them, allowing the thoughts to settle into the material with patient precision. Small dark curls of wax build up along the edge of the bronze point. He turns the stylus in his hand. He uses the flat, broad end of the tool to smooth over a line. The wax yields to the pressure, erasing the previous thought, leaving a perfect blank surface behind. It is a quiet act of correction, a simple, physical manifestation of a mind endlessly refining itself. The erasure makes no sound, creating a long, heavy pocket of silence in the tent. The silence is comfortable. It is thick and warm, smelling of melting beeswax and dry oak smoke. The man at the table stops his work entirely. The stylus is lowered. His hands come to rest on the edge of the wooden tablet. He remains perfectly still for a long moment, watching the embers pulse in the iron basket. The red light reflects in his dark eyes. He is aware of the arrival. He has known of the presence in the tent since the heavy leather flap fell shut against the wind. He does not startle. He does not demand an immediate report or a formal greeting. There is no need for the rigid protocols of the capital here on the edge of the known world. He slowly lifts his head. The movement is tired, bearing the physical weight of his years, but it is deeply grounded. He turns to look across the small shadowed space. His gaze meets the visitor. The eyes of the Emperor are profoundly calm. They hold the weariness of a lifetime spent carrying the burdens of millions. They have seen the devastation of the plague, the endless mud of the battlefields, and the betrayals of trusted friends. Yet, there is no bitterness in them. There is no harshness, no cruelty, no demanding arrogance. There is only a quiet, vast acceptance of the world exactly as it is. His look is a shield. It conveys an absolute, unshakable stability. The chaos of the empire breaks against the discipline of his mind like water breaking against a stone. He holds that stability in the room, offering it freely to anyone who enters. He takes a slow, deep breath of the warm air. He parts his lips to speak. His voice is low. It is a deep, gravelly sound, worn soft by decades of speaking over the noise of marching armies and winter storms. It does not fill the room with volume, but with a quiet, resonant gravity. Sit. The single word hangs in the warm air. It is not a command given by a ruler to a subject. It is an invitation offered by a tired man to a weary traveller. He gestures with a weathered hand toward a small, folding wooden stool on the other side of the iron brazier. A thick, heavy bearskin is draped over the leather seat of the stool. The fur looks dark, dense, and incredibly soft. He lowers his hand and lets it rest on his knee. The fire is enough for two. The voice is steady, carrying a profound, quiet kindness. There is no expectation of conversation. There is no demand for news from Rome or reports from the watchtowers. The night is meant for rest. The long journey is over, and the only requirement now is to accept the warmth being offered. He looks at the simple surroundings of his tent. He looks at the plain wooden cot, the iron chest, the unadorned leather walls. A faint, tired smile touches the corners of his mouth. It is a smile of deep understanding. Do not seek the palace. His words are slow, measured, and rich with quiet conviction. The philosopher needs no marble. He turns his gaze back to the glowing red coals of the brazier. The light dances across the deep lines of his face. Only a fire and enough silence to think. The words settle into the room, grounding the space in absolute simplicity. The invitation is accepted. The distance across the hard-packed earth floor is crossed. The air near the brazier is thick with heat. It radiates outward from the iron basket in slow, comforting waves. The body lowers onto the wooden stool. The heavy bearskin yields, moulding instantly to the shape of the weary traveller. The fur is warm, having absorbed the heat of the fire for hours. It rises up around the sides, creating a soft, dense cocoon against the residual chill of the journey. The muscles in the back finally release their long-held tension. The weight of the body sinks deeply into the fur and the wood. The legs stretch out slightly toward the iron brazier. The heat of the oak embers washes over the cold boots and the stiff fabric of the travelling clothes. It sinks through the leather and the wool. It reaches the skin, slow and steady, thawing the bones from the inside out. The relief is absolute. It is a heavy, sinking feeling of profound safety. There is nothing left to defend against. The Praetorian Guard stands outside, forming a wall of iron and discipline between this tent and the dark frontier. Inside the tent, the quiet discipline of the man by the fire keeps watch over the dark hours. The world is entirely secure. The Emperor does not speak again immediately. He allows the silence to return, giving it space to expand and fill the tent. He does not intrude upon the quiet settling of his guest. He understands the physical toll of the road. He knows the heavy exhaustion that follows a long march through the cold. He picks up the bronze stylus once more. His fingers find their familiar grip on the smooth metal. He lowers the sharp point back to the dark beeswax. The sound resumes. Scratch. A slow, deliberate mark in the wax. Scratch. The rhythm is re-established. It is a metronome for the drifting mind. The sound of the writing blends with the low, steady hum of the wind outside the leather walls. It blends with the occasional soft shift of the burning oak coals. The shadows in the room remain long and steady. The amber light of the fire continues to cast a warm, sepia glow over the simple wooden furniture. The smell of the melting wax is sweet and earthy. The smell of the smoke is grounding and familiar. The mind begins to drift, released from the weight of the day. There are no decisions to be made here. There are no problems to be solved. The responsibilities of the world have been lifted and placed on the broad, cloaked shoulders of the man sitting across the fire. He accepts the weight without complaint. He processes the chaos of the empire through the steady repeating motion of his stylus on the wax. He translates the burden of power into the quiet discipline of philosophy. The safety of the room is absolute. It is a fortress built not of stone, but of reason. The cold cannot enter. The danger cannot cross the threshold. The exhaustion of the long journey begins to transform into a heavy, peaceful lethargy. The eyes grow heavy in the warm amber light. The rhythmic scratching of the bronze on the wax continues, endless and steady. It is the sound of a mind keeping order in the dark. It is the sound of protection. The fire burns down slowly, marking the passage of the quiet hours. The night on the frontier has been secured. The watch has been taken up by the philosopher king. There is nothing left to do but sit by the fire and let the warmth take hold. The rhythmic sound of the bronze stylus suddenly stops. The cessation of the noise is gentle. It does not jolt the senses. It simply leaves an open space in the warm air of the tent. The bronze tool is laid softly upon the wooden table. It makes a dull, muted sound against the timber. The emperor lowers his hands. He lets them rest on the edge of the smooth, dark beeswax. He leans back slowly in his folding leather chair. The worn leather creaks, a low and familiar sound of settling weight. He releases a long, slow breath. The exhalation carries the invisible tension of the day away from his shoulders. It vanishes into the smoke of the brazier. This silence rushes back to fill the corners of the room. It is a heavy, comfortable silence. It is the silence of an absolute fortress. The wind outside continues its low, mournful hum against the thick calfskin walls. It is a reminder of the freezing world beyond the camp, a world that cannot reach the space beside the fire. The man with the greying beard does not look at the parchment or the wax. His eyes are drawn to the deep red glow of the oak coals. His gnarled, weathered hands reach out across the small table. He picks up a plain cup of beaten bronze. The metal reflects the shifting amber light of the embers. It holds a small measure of wine, heavily watered and warmed by its proximity to the heat. He cradles the cup in his palms. He does not bring it to his lips immediately. He lets the residual heat of the metal seep into his stiff joints. The firelight catches the deep lines on his face, casting long, slow-moving shadows across the curved ceiling of the tent. The shadows dance with a hypnotic, all unhurried rhythm. When he finally speaks, his voice seems to rise from the earth itself. It is a low, resonant rumble, a sound that vibrates gently in the chest, offering no threat, no urgency. "It is strange," he says softly. His words float into the warm air, suspended in the quiet. how the mind travels when the body is finally forced to stay still. He brings the bronze cup to his lips. He takes a slow, measured sip. The movement is deliberate and entirely unhurried. He lowers the cup, resting it on his knee. I was not born to this. He makes a slight, vague gesture with his free hand. The gesture encompasses the leather walls, the camp outside, the invisible borders of the vast empire stretching out into the dark. To the purple, to the command of the legions, his voice is steady, entirely stripped of pride or arrogance. It is merely a statement of fact delivered by a man who has spent a lifetime examining the truth of his own existence. My youth was spent in quiet rooms, with books, with tutors. He looks deeply into the pulsing red core of the brazier. I learned to love the simple turning of a page, the quiet logic of the philosophers. I thought my life would be a study of the mind. A slow, heavy pause settles between his words. The fire pops faintly, a tiny muffled sound in the thick heat. The wind presses a little harder against the roof, then retreats. Then Antoninus adopted me. The name is spoken with a profound, complicated reverence. He was a good man, the best of men. He was patient, unmoved by flattery. He showed me what a ruler should be. He governed without cruelty, without the need for constant display. The emperor's eyes soften in the firelight, remembering a time before the mud and the snow of the northern campaigns. He gave me everything a father could give. He rotates the warm bronze cup slowly between his palms. He gave me the world. Another long, heavy silence falls over the tent. The fire settles. A single coal shifts in the iron cage, sending a slow cascade of ash into the heat. But the world is a heavy gift. The tone drops a fraction lower. It is a confession offered to the dying fire. To wear the purple is not to be elevated. It is to be set apart. It is to be severed from the ordinary flow of human life. He looks down at his hands, the hands that sign the edicts, that order the marches, that hold the lives of millions in their worn grip. It cuts a man off from the simple things, from walking a street unnoticed, from knowing if a smile is genuine or merely a mask worn for the emperor, from knowing if a friend is truly a friend or merely a petitioner seeking a favour. He turns the bronze cup slowly in his hands. The metal catches the light, fades, catches again. The melancholy in his voice is profound, yet it is completely peaceful. There is no anger in it. There is no resentment. It is the calm acceptance of a stone sitting in the path of a river, worn smooth by the relentless current of duty. They taught me philosophy from a young age. They brought the greatest minds of Greece to my door. They taught me the Stoic path. His gaze lifts from the fire, staring into the middle distance of the dim room. They taught me to govern my temper, to accept fate without complaint, to serve the common good, even when the body screams for rest. The heat of the brazier continues to radiate outward. It washes over the heavy bearskin draped across the wooden stool. It sinks deep into the muscles, melting away the final remnants of cold from the journey. The body feels incredibly heavy, sinking further into the soft fur, anchored to the earth by the warmth and the low, steady voice. They taught me all the virtues. The emperor leans his forearms on his knees, bringing his face closer to the amber glow. The lines around his eyes deepen in the shadows. His voice becomes a quiet, resonant whisper over the crackling coals. They taught me to rule before I knew what loneliness was. He pauses. The wind hums a low, solitary note outside the tent. Now I know they are the same thing. The words settle into the room, heavy and true. The profound isolation of absolute power hangs in the warm air, but it does not settle as grief. Instead, it brings a deep, overwhelming sense of security. The loneliness belongs to him. The burden belongs to him. He stands at the top of the world alone, absorbing the shock of the universe so that those beneath his watch can sleep in peace. He does not ask for pity. He does not seek to share the weight. He simply states the reality of his existence, a quiet observation made in the dark hours of the night. He takes one final slow sip from the bronze cup. He sets it down on the wooden table, next to the wax tablet and the stylus. He folds his hands together, resting them loosely in his lap. He does not speak again for a long time. He allows the quiet to return, wrapping around the tent like a thick woolen blanket. The embers pulse in their iron cage. Red, fading to black. Red, fading to black. The rhythm of the dying fire is slow and steady. The breathing of the Emperor is a constant grounding anchor. The coals breathe slowly in the silence. He is sufficient unto himself, guarded by his own reason, protected by his own unbreakable discipline. Something in the chest loosens quietly, without announcement. If the Emperor can carry the weight of the entire world and still sit calmly by a fire, then the small anxieties of a single life can surely be set aside for the night. They can be left outside the leather flap, frozen in the dark forest. Inside the tent there is only warmth, there is only safety, there is only the slow, inevitable drift toward unconsciousness. The shadows lengthen as the coals begin to cool very slightly. The room feels darker, softer, more intimate. The heavy fur of the bear skin provides perfect support, carrying the exhausted body so that it no longer has to support itself. The Emperor keeps watch. His quiet endurance is a fortress wall. Nothing can breach it. The sleep that approaches is not a vulnerable state. It is a protected surrender, a surrender into the profound quiet of a mind that has accepted everything and fears nothing. The silence stretches out, measured only by the slow breathing in the tent. The brazier hums with a low, quiet heat. The Emperor shifts slightly in his leather chair. He looks toward the thick walls of the tent. It is as if he can see through the oiled calf skin, as if his gaze penetrates the dark woods beyond the trench. When he speaks again, his voice is barely louder than the wind outside. It is a steady, grounded sound. They write to me from the Senate. They send letters sealed in bright red wax. They ask when I will return to the Palatine Hill. They ask when the triumphs will be held in the streets. He shakes his head slowly. The movement is almost imperceptible in the dim amber light. They do not understand this place. Rome is a city of marble and memory. It is a place where men argue over the shade of a toga, or the placement of a stone column. It is a world of endless shallow noise. He gestures vaguely toward the north, toward the unseen river. But here, his voice drops, settling deep into his chest. Here there is only the mud, and the ice, and the endless silent trees of the Quadi and the Marcomanni. This is not a place for politics. This is a place where nature strips a man down to the bone. It leaves only what is essential, only what is true. He rests his elbows on his knees, leaning closer to the fire, his scarred hands clasped together loosely. I have spent more years in these leather tents than in the halls of my ancestors. I have watched the seasons turn from the back of a horse. I have seen the autumn rains turn the northern roads into rivers of grey clay. I have seen the deep winter freeze that clay into solid iron. He looks at the pulsing red coals. The cold here does not merely touch the skin. It reaches deep into the chest. It tests the resolve of the mind. It asks you every morning if you have the will to rise from your cot. The warmth of the brazier feels even more profound now. The contrast between his words and the safety of the room is absolute. The heavy bearskin provides an anchor against his stories of the freezing mud. The body sinks deeper into the soft fur. There's a profound comfort in knowing that the harshness he describes is entirely locked outside. The cold is locked outside the calfskin walls. The brazier holds its quiet dominion over the room, protected by his endurance. The Danube does not forgive. His voice is a low, steady rumble in the quiet tent. Neither does the frontier. It does not care if you wear the purple. It does not care if you command 30 legions. The frost bites the emperor exactly as it bites the lowest foot soldier on the watch. We share the same rations, the same damp wool, the same endless heavy night. He pauses, letting the reality of his life settle into the warm air. Every winter I wonder if I will see another. He states this not with fear. He states it without a trace of self-pity or sorrow. He states it as a simple fact of nature, like observing the fall of a leaf from an oak tree. And yet, there is a strange peace in it. In Rome, a man can hide behind his wealth. He can hide behind his titles and his flatterers. He can pretend he is more than a mortal creature. But here, the wind tears all of those illusions away. You're left alone with your own mind. If your mind is chaotic, the frontier will break you. But if your mind is ordered, the frontier becomes a temple. He looks back around the small, sparse room. He looks at the wooden chest and the plain folding stool. That is why I prefer this tent. It is small. It is simple. It contains nothing that I cannot afford to lose. When you realize how little you actually need to survive, the fear begins to vanish. A fire, a heavy cloak, a dry place to rest. These are riches beyond measure. Oh, when the sleet is falling in the dark. The coals exhale a slow breath of amber light. The bearskin holds its warmth without effort. We march, the emperor continues, his voice growing slower. We build our camps in the wilderness. We dig the trenches and raise the palisades, and then we take them down and we march again. It is a cycle as endless as the turning of the stars. He slowly unclasps his hands, resting his palms flat on his knees. Men fight for pieces of land that will ultimately swallow their bones. They spill blood for borders that will shift and fade in 100 years. I watch them from the ridge. I do my duty, because it is my lot to hold the line. I cannot abandon my post, but I do not mistake the line for eternity. Eternity is not found on a map drawn by generals. It is found in the quiet space between a man's thoughts. The pacing of his speech decelerates further. The pauses between his sentences grow longer, heavier. The tent is a perfect cocoon of amber light and dry heat. The tribes across the river, they are not so different from us. They feel the same biting cold. They love their children. They fear the encroaching dark. We're all just actors playing our assigned roles on a very brief stage. My role is to wear this crimson cloak, to sit in this chair, to keep the watch. He turns his head slowly. He looks across the small space, the firelight reflecting in his calm, tired eyes, so that others may sleep. The fire settles, the tent holds, the emperor keeps watch. You have travelled far to reach this place. You have crossed the very lands I speak of. You have felt the bite of the wind and the depth of the mud on the northern roads. But that journey is over. The frontier stops at the door of this tent. It cannot touch you here. Within these walls, there is no war, there is no winter, there is no tomorrow, There is only the fire and the quiet. He looks down at the wooden table. He reaches out and picks up the bronze stylus once more. He holds it lightly in his scarred hand. He is ready to return to his wax, ready to return to his private thoughts. He leaves the warm, heavy silence to wrap securely around his guest. The body feels entirely weightless now, supported perfectly by the soft fur and the steady heat. The mind is quiet, guarded by the reason of the man sitting by the coals. There is nothing left to fear. The bronze stylus remains resting on the rough grain of the wooden table. The Emperor does not pick it up. He leans back further into the worn leather of his folding chair. The heavy fabric of his dark crimson cloak shifts, settling around his broad shoulders. The heat of the iron brazier has reached its peak. It is a steady, overwhelming warmth that fills every corner of the small enclosed space. It sinks into the thick bare skin draped across the wooden stool. It radiates into the heavy wool blankets of the simple cot. The body feels entirely anchored to the earth. The muscles have forgotten the tension of the cold. The joints have loosened, heavy and relaxed. The man by the fire stares into the pulsing red core of the oak embers. His eyes are deeply shadowed in the amber light. He's looking at something far beyond the confines of the leather tent. He's looking back across the miles, across the years. The mud of the Danube is hard, he says, his voice a low, resonant murmur. It pulls at the boots. It exhausts the horses. But the shadows of Rome are heavier. He turns his head slightly, watching the smoke drift lazily toward the vent in the roof. They follow a man, even to the edge of the world. His voice is entirely devoid of anger. It is merely a quiet observation of the nature of memory. We brought the legions here to fight the tribes. But we brought something else with us from the east. A sickness. He speaks of the great plague that swept through the empire. He does not speak of it with horror. He speaks of it with the calm, detached clarity of a philosopher observing the turning of the seasons. It moved through the camps like a silent wind. It moved through the streets of Rome. It emptied the forums. It silenced the markets. He rests his weathered hands loosely in his lap. I watch the carts carry them away. The senators, the merchants, the soldiers, the beggars. He takes a slow, deep breath, letting it out in a quiet sigh. Death does not distinguish between the slave and the one who wears the purple. It treats the marble palace and the leather tent with the exact same indifference. And in that indifference, there is a profound truth. We are all made of the same earth. We all return to the same quiet dust. To fear it is to fear the very nature of the universe. His words are not frightening. They are deeply, overwhelmingly comforting. They strip away the frantic, anxious clinging to life. They offer a release from the constant struggle to control what cannot be controlled. If the Emperor of the world accepts his own fragility with such grace, the hand opens, the grip loosens. The bearskin receives the weight. The brazier breathes. I have watched many return to the dust, he continues softly. His voice drops a fraction lower, taking on a tone of complicated, quiet tenderness. Faustina. He speaks his wife's name to the fire. The syllables hang in the warm air, suspended in the dry heat. The Senate whispered about her. They wrote their little rumours in the baths. They thought I did not know. He shakes his head slowly. They understand nothing of the human heart. They understand nothing of the compromises made in the shadows of power. I loved her. He looks down at his empty hands. Perhaps not the way she needed. Duty is a thief. It stole the years we might have had in the gardens of the villas. It replaced them with the cold stones of military camps. She followed me to the frontier, the mother of the camps. She endured this life when she was built for softer things. A long, heavy silence falls over the room. The wind presses against the roof of the tent, a low, constant drone. The memory of her is not a sharp pain. It is a dull, weathered ache, worn smooth by the passage of time and the application of reason. He's accepted her loss as he accepts the changing of the autumn leaves. It is the will of nature, and nature is never wrong. And then there are the betrayals, he murmurs. The tone of his voice does not shift. There's no sudden spike of emotion. There is only the steady, unhurried rhythm of a man recounting a dream. Cassius, one of my best generals, a man I trusted with the eastern provinces. A courier arrived in the night, covered in the dust of a long, desperate ride. He brought news that Cassius had proclaimed himself emperor. He had told the legions I was dead. The fire pops faintly. A small shower of orange sparks rises and quickly fades into the dark air. My counsellors demanded blood. They demanded vengeance. They wanted to march the army east and burn his cities to the ground. The emperor looks up, his dark eyes meeting the quiet gaze of his guest. But what is vengeance? What is anger? It is a poison a man drinks, hoping his enemy will die. I felt no anger toward him, only a deep, profound pity. Pity for a man who believed that a title and a crown could bring him peace. He traded his honor for a piece of land that would eventually bury him. He leans back again, the leather of the chair creaking softly. I wrote to the Senate. I told them no blood was to be shed on my account. I forgave him. I forgave him before I knew he was already dead, killed by his own men. A slow, tired smile touches the corners of his mouth. Forgiveness is easier when it costs nothing. But it's always the only rational choice. To hold on to a wrong is to carry a burning coal in your own hand. The wisdom of his words is a heavy physical weight in the room. It settles over the shoulders like a thick woolen blanket. It extinguishes the small, petty grievances of the day. It renders all conflicts meaningless in the face of the vast, quiet eternity he envisions. The air in the tent is very still. Even the smoke has stopped moving. The tent walls hold the world at bay. Nothing reaches this fire. The Emperor has disarmed the entire universe with his forgiveness. He sits quietly for a long time. The pauses between his fragments of speech are growing longer. The silence is taking over the tent. The heat of the brazier is a constant grounding force. And then, his voice is barely a whisper now. Commodus. He speaks his son's name. It is the heaviest word he has spoken all night. He does not elaborate immediately. He stares into the dying red embers, watching the ash begin to form on the edges of the oak. The silence stretches out. It is a father's silence, filled with the quiet resignation of a man who sees a shadow approaching, but knows he cannot change the course of the sun. A father can offer wisdom, he says, his voice thick with weariness. He can provide the greatest tutors. He can set the example of a disciplined life. He closes his eyes for a brief moment. He cannot force it to be received. Every man must choose his own master, reason or desire. I cannot walk the path for him. I can only leave the markers behind. He opens his eyes. He looks at the bronze stylus resting on the table. He has laid out all his ghosts. He has examined them in the firelight. He has applied his philosophy to his grief, his betrayals, and his fears. And he has found that the philosophy holds. The fortress of his mind remains unbreached. Nay, the quiet acceptance in his voice is the ultimate permission to rest. If this man can sit in a leather tent surrounded by the hostile forests of the frontier, carrying the memories of plague, betrayal, and a troubled air, and still remain perfectly, utterly calm, Beyond the leather walls, the dark hours hold nothing that cannot wait until morning. The anxieties of the day are infinitely small. They are dust on the wind. They are shadows that fade when the light of reason is applied. The tent holds, wrapped in the heavy bearskin, warmed by the iron brazier, guarded by a mind that has conquered the world, not with swords, but with an absolute, unshakable peace. The Emperor reaches out a weathered hand. He picks up the bronze stylus. The time for looking backward is over. The time for securing the present moment has arrived. The heavy burdens of the past have been spoken and released. They drift up toward the small ventilation opening in the roof of the tent. They vanish entirely into the freezing night air. Inside, the warmth remains absolute. The Emperor slowly turns his head. He looks at the plain wooden table beside his folding chair. His gaze falls upon a pair of hinged wooden boards resting in the amber light. The hollowed centres of the tablets are filled with smooth, dark beeswax. It is a perfectly blank surface, waiting for the discipline of his mind. He reaches out with his right hand. His scarred, weathered fingers wrap around the bronze stylus. The metal is dull, warmed only by the ambient heat of the brazier. He lifts the tool with practiced, effortless ease. He holds it suspended for a brief moment over the dark wax. He looks across the warm space above the iron basket of coals. His expression is incredibly soft in the shifting shadows. It is the look of a man who is finally preparing to lay down his armour. Not the armour of steel and leather, but the heavy invisible armour of command. He speaks, his voice a low, resonant rumble that barely disturbs the air. Do you mind? The question is simple, carrying no weight of authority or demand. It is a quiet, genuine courtesy from a host to a guest in the deep hours of the night. I need to write before I sleep. His dark eyes reflect the dying red glow of the embers. It is the only thing that keeps me sane. He slowly lowers his head. He brings the sharp point of the bronze tool to the surface of the wax. The first sound is a soft, defined scrape. It is the physical sound of a heavy thought being trapped in material form. It is followed immediately by another, then another. A steady, constant rhythm is born in the quiet tent. It is not a loud noise. It is entirely intimate, contained perfectly within the small room. It does not carry beyond the thick, oiled calfskin walls. It exists only in this protected sphere of warmth. The scratching is intensely methodical. It does not race with the anxiety of a frantic mind. It does not pause with the hesitation of indecision. It is the sound of an intellect moving forward at a deliberate, measured pace. This sound takes root in the heavy air. It steps in to replace the chaotic, racing thoughts of the long day. When the Emperor's thoughts begin to drift, the sound draws them back. The stylus does not permit the mind to wander far. The steady scrape of the bronze demands absolutely nothing of the room. It only offers a rhythm, a predictable, unbroken cadence. The ear attaches to it effortlessly. The breathing naturally begins to synchronize with its slow, even pace. The repeating sound acts as a physical balm to the exhausted nervous system. The smell of the melting beeswax rises faintly from the wooden table. It is a sweet, earthy scent, warmed by the friction of the stylus. It mixes perfectly with the dry, grounded smell of the fading oak smoke. The air in the tent feels incredibly thick now. It feels almost like a warm liquid pressing gently against the skin. The heavy bearskin draped over the wooden stool absorbs the entire weight of the body. The fur is dense and soft, rising up slightly around the sides. It creates a perfect, insulating cocoon against any lingering memory of the cold. The heat from the brazier washes over the heavy wool of the travelling clothes. It sinks deep into the muscles of the legs and the lower back. There is a profound, overwhelming sensation of sinking. Sinking into the wood. Sinking into the earth. Sinking into the absolute safety of the room. The Emperor's hand moves steadily across the dark wax. He does not write for an audience. He is not drafting a grand speech for the Senate in Rome. He is not writing marching orders for the generals of the legions. He is writing entirely for himself. He is cleaning his own mind before the day concludes. He is sweeping away the dust of the frontier. He is carving away the unnecessary anxieties of the human condition. With every single stroke of the stylus, the room feels safer. He's doing the heavy lifting of philosophy. He's processing the fear of death, the sting of betrayal, the bone-deep exhaustion of the cold. He processes it all before the last ember dies. The Greek letters carved into the wax need no translation. The profound meaning is conveyed purely through the sound itself, the steady, unhurried, constant scratching. It is a lullaby composed of absolute reason. The iron brazier hums very softly. The red coals are beginning to form a thick layer of pale grey ash along their edges. The heat remains powerful, but the amber light is steadily dimming. The shadows cast on the curved ceiling of the tent grow longer, softer. They blur at their borders, losing their sharp, waking definition. The room is shifting inevitably into the deepest phase of the night. The Emperor writes on without pausing. His discipline is a tangible physical presence in the room. It stands guard at the heavy leather door. It patrols the inner perimeter of the tent. It guarantees that no harm, whether physical or mental, can enter this space. The eyes grow incredibly heavy in the dimming light. The eyelids drift downward, slowly closing out the sepia glow of the fire. The visual world begins to fade away completely. What remains is only the sensation of deep, penetrating heat, the feeling of the soft, thick fur supporting the spine, and the sound, the constant grounding, repetitive sound of the bronze on the wax. It clears the mind of its accumulated clutter. It sweeps the internal landscape entirely clean. It leaves a vast, quiet emptiness behind. An emptiness that is not lonely, but deeply and profoundly peaceful. He reaches the end of a line on the tablet. His hand moves smoothly back to the left side of the wooden board. The rhythmic scraping resumes without a break. It is a sound that has existed for centuries, the sound of human memory and human wisdom being preserved. But here, by the dying fire, it is not memory for the sake of history. It is medicine for the weary soul. The bronze cuts through the dark surface, revealing the lighter wood beneath the wax. It is a process of uncovering the quiet truth, of stripping away the dark, confusing surface of the world to find the solid foundation beneath. The confusing, loud surface of the waking day is being scraped away. The solid, quiet foundation beneath is being revealed. The breathing in the tent is perfectly, effortlessly synchronized. The slow, deep inhalations of the Emperor, the slow, deep inhalations of the guests sitting across the fire. They rise and fall together in the warm, dry air. The wind outside the tent seems to lose its biting strength. Its mournful howl drops to a low, distant hum. It becomes a steady white noise that blends seamlessly with the scratching of the bronze. The two sounds wrap around each other in the dark. They create a thick acoustic blanket that covers the mind. This blanket protects the consciousness from sudden thoughts or sudden fears. The Emperor pauses his work. He doesn't look up from the tablet. He simply holds the stylus still in his weathered hand. He is listening to the silence of the room. He is testing the atmosphere of his own mind. Finding it perfectly calm, he lowers the bronze point again. The scratching returns. It brings a wave of profound physical relief. The anchor has not been lifted. The watch continues. He will not stop until his mind is perfectly ordered for the night. He will not sleep until he has secured the internal perimeter for himself and his guest. The quiet dedication of this tired, grey-bearded man is overwhelming. He asks for nothing in return for his vigil. He only offers the absolute safety of his presence. The body completely surrenders to the wooden stool and the heavy fur. There is no energy left in the muscles to hold the weight of the world. There is no desire left in the mind to carry it. Beyond the tent, the Empire has nothing more to offer than noise. The rhythmic scratching is a gentle, steady current. It pulls a small boat away from a noisy, crowded shore, drifting out into a vast, dark, perfectly calm ocean. The shore fades rapidly into the distance. The noise of the Empire, the marching of the legions, the politics of Rome are all gone. There is only the deep, heavy water and the steady, rhythmic sound of the oar, the stylus on the wax, guiding the way into the dark, guiding the way safely into rest. The bronze stylus moves steadily across the dark surface of the wax. It does not falter. It does not rush. It is a sound of absolute, unyielding order. The scratching is a low, rhythmic texture in the warm air. It fills the small space of the leather tent. It pushes away the vast, empty silence of the northern frontier. The fire in the iron brazier has settled into a deep, quiet burn. The flames are gone. Only the red, pulsing core of the oak coals remains. The heat they cast is heavy and dry. It sinks perfectly into the thick fur of the bearskin. It wraps around the shoulders like a heavy woolen cloak. The body is entirely surrendered to the wooden stool. There is no tension left in the spine. There is no vigilance left in the mind. The Emperor sits hunched slightly over his small wooden table. His grey beard catches the dying amber light. His hand continues its slow, measured journey across the hinged tablet. He is carving his philosophy into the yielding beeswax. He is emptying his mind onto the board. He stops the movement of the stylus for a brief moment. He does not lift his head. He stares at the words he has just written. The silence in the tent expands, thick and warm. The wind outside hums a low, distant note. Then he speaks. His voice is no longer the steady, conversational rumble of a storyteller. It has dropped to a low, gravelly whisper. It is a sound meant only for himself and for the dying fire. When you arise in the morning, the words float into the heavy air. They are slow. They are measured. They carry the weight of a lifetime of discipline. Think of what a privilege it is to be alive. He pauses. Think, to enjoy, to love. He lowers his head again. The bronze stylus meets the wax. The scratching resumes. It fills the long, heavy space left by his voice. The sound is deeply hypnotic. It is a repetitive, physical anchor in the quiet room. The words require nothing. The words are simply another layer of the comforting atmosphere. They are smooth stones dropped into a deep, calm pool. They sink slowly to the bottom, leaving the surface perfectly undisturbed. The scratching of the bronze continues. It is the sound of a man building a fortress of reason, a fortress that protects against the chaos of the waking world. Inside this fortress, there are no expectations. There are no duties to fulfill. The Emperor does not require conversation. He does not require attention. He only offers the safety of his presence. The steady rhythm of his writing is a constant reassurance. It is proof that the watch is being kept. The red coals shift slightly in the iron basket. A soft, muffled crackle echoes in the tent. A tiny shower of grey ash falls through the grate. The temperature in the room remains perfectly, deeply warm. The smell of the melting beeswax is sweet and grounding. The stylus carves another line. The sound is a slow, methodical scrape. It fills the space between the tent walls. It leaves no room for anything else. The Emperor speaks again. The pause between his spoken thoughts has grown significantly longer. The happiness of your life. His voice is barely a breath above the sound of the wind. Depends upon the quality of your thoughts. He does not elaborate. He does not explain. He simply sets the truth down in the warm air and returns to his wax. The scratching returns. It is the dominant sound in the universe now. The camp outside has faded completely from awareness. The thousands of sleeping soldiers, the sentries on the wooden walls, the dark, freezing waters of the Danube, they no longer exist. There is only this small, amber-lit space. There is only the heavy fur, the warm iron, and the rhythmic sound of the bronze. The shadows in the tent deepen. The amber light retreats to the edges of the space. The darkness is soft here. It matches the silence perfectly. The camp beyond the walls has grown entirely silent. The wooden stool makes no sound. The bearskin has absorbed everything. Only the scratch of the bronze remains. The constant repeating scrape of the stylus. The rhythm pulls the room into deeper and deeper quiet. The Emperor is a guardian in the night. His wisdom is a shield against the anxieties of the future. His discipline is a wall against the regrets of the past. He carries the burden of the empire. The weight lifts from the room. The pacing of his writing slows down. The strokes of the stylus become longer, more deliberate. The sound stretches out in the quiet room. He is not rushing to finish. There is no deadline in this tent. There is no morning approaching. There is only an endless, comfortable night. He stops writing again. The silence is profound. It is a heavy, woolen silence that wraps around the ears. Loss is nothing else but change. The murmured words are a soft vibration in the chest. And change is nature's delight. He accepts the turning of the world. He accepts the fading of the light. His acceptance is entirely contagious. The fire stops fighting the night. It yields to the slow, inevitable darkening of the coals. The tent holds what remains. The stylus meets the wax once more. The rhythm is re-established. It is the sound of a heartbeat slowing down. It is the sound of the world coming to a complete and final rest. The red coals pulse in the dark. The warmth is a constant physical embrace. The Emperor watches over the quiet space. He translates the chaotic universe into simple, orderly lines of Greek. He tames the wilderness of the human condition with a piece of bronze and a board of wood. The air in the tent grows thicker as the hour deepens. The oak smoke has settled into the leather walls. It is a scent of ancient forests and long marches, now brought to a state of total rest. The heavy wool cloak of the Emperor absorbs the remaining light. He sits like a statue carved from dark stone. Only his right hand moves. Only the bronze stylus breaks the stillness. The wax curls away from the sharp point. It builds up in tiny, dark ridges along the edge of the tablet. He brushes them away with a slow, calloused thumb. The physical texture of the wax and the wood is grounded and real. It is a stark contrast to the fleeting, insubstantial nature of human worry. The worries have been entirely banished from this space. The tent is a vacuum of anxiety. The tent is completely still. There is a profound luxury in this emptiness. It is the luxury of not having to perform, of not having to hold the world together. The man across the fire is holding it together. He has held it together for decades. He will hold it together until the dawn. There's absolutely nothing required of the guest. Only the heavy fur, only the warmth in the bones. The air in the room moves in a slow, steady tide. It carries the scent of the beeswax. It carries the scent of the oak. The stylus scratches, a long drawn-out line, a short definitive mark. The rhythm is mesmerizing. It is a pendulum swinging slowly in a dark room, back and forth, mark and space, sound and silence. The space between the sounds grows slightly wider. The Emperor is taking more time between his thoughts. His mind is preparing for the eventual surrender to the hour. But he does not abandon his post yet. He remains vigilant in his philosophy. He murmurs one more fragment to the dying coals. Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. The whisper is incredibly soft. Death hangs over you. In any other place, the words might carry fear. But here, in the warm amber light, they carry only a profound relief. In any other place, the words might demand something. Here, they ask nothing. The fire does not move. The tent does not move. Only the bronze and the wax and the slow deepening of the dark. The stylus returns to the wax. The scratching is a gentle confirmation of this truth. It is a lullaby of stoic acceptance. The tent holds the stillness. Only the fire breathes. The darkness is deep and incredibly comforting. The warmth of the brazier fills every corner of the leather tent. The world outside the leather tent is gone. The empire is gone. There is only the slow, steady scrape of bronze, and the infinite quiet safety of the night. The bronze stylus moves across the dark beeswax. The sound is a slow, rhythmic constant in the warm air. It is a dry, textured scrape. It parts the smooth surface of the wax with absolute precision. The sound anchors the heavy atmosphere of the tent. It is the only action taking place in the quiet room. The rest of the world has come to a complete standstill. The Emperor does not hurry his hand. There is long, deliberate pause between the carving of each letter. The scratching sound is a brief, physical presence. Then it fades, leaving a wide expanse of silence behind it. The silence is immediately filled by the low, steady hum of the wind outside, and the soft, rhythmic breathing of the man by the fire. He sits heavily in the folding leather chair. His dark crimson cloak absorbs the dimming amber light. The iron brazier is no longer casting a bright glow. The oak coals have burned down to their most enduring state. Their deep, pulsing red embers, covered in a thin, fragile layer of pale grey ash. The heat they radiate is no longer sharp. It is a thick, ambient warmth that fills every corner of the leather tent. It settles into the heavy wool blankets on the cot. It sinks deep into the dark fur of the bearskin draped over the wooden stool. The physical weight of the body is entirely supported by the fur and the wood. The muscles have surrendered all their effort. The bones feel heavy and completely at rest. The Emperor lifts the stylus. He holds it suspended over the wooden tablet. He does not look at the wax. He looks at the dying red coals, watching the slow, inevitable shift of the ash. The silence in the tent stretches out. It becomes a vast, quiet space. It is a space completely emptied of demand. He parts his lips. His voice is a low, gravelly murmur, vibrating gently in the dry heat. The universe is transformation. The words are spoken without a trace of fear. Life is opinion. He lowers the bronze tool. The sharp point meets the wax again. The scratching resumes. It is a slow, methodical recording of his quiet acceptance. The sound pushes away any lingering resistance to the night. Stillness is not a weakness. It is the ultimate foundation of strength. He writes a few more words, his hand moving in the soft shadows. The tiny curls of dark wax build up along the edge of the bronze. He smooths them away with the flat end of the tool. The erasure makes no sound. It is a physical act of letting go, of accepting that a thought has served its purpose and can now be released. He stops the movement of his hand once more. The pauses between his writing are growing longer and heavier. The night is deepening, pressing gently against the oiled calfskin walls. The camp outside is entirely silent. The thousands of men are asleep in their tents. The horses are still. The heavy wooden gates are locked against the freezing forest. The Emperor keeps the only necessary watch. He turns his head slightly in the dim light. His weathered face is calm, carved with the deep lines of a lifetime of duty. He speaks into the warm, heavy air. "You do not need to solve anything tonight." The words are a profound, overwhelming relief. They dismantle the invisible armour the mind wears during the day. They cut through the endless, exhausting lists of tasks and worries. His voice drops even lower, a quiet rumble of absolute authority. Not even the Empire needs solving tonight. The weight of those words settles over the room. If the man who holds the entire civilized world in his hands can set his burden down, the tent holds only stillness. The problems of the day belong to the daylight. The night belongs entirely to peace. He turns his gaze back to the simple wooden board on his lap. He returns to his writing. The scratching sound is slower now. It is the sound of a pendulum losing its momentum, swinging in a shorter, quieter arc. Scratch. A long, heavy silence. Scratch. The sound is a thread through the dark. It holds the warmth of the tent together. The scent of the melting beeswax is grounding. It is the smell of quiet labour and ancient libraries. It blends with the residual smell of the oak smoke and the oiled leather. The air is incredibly thick, slowing the passage of time to a near standstill. The Emperor writes a single word. He pauses. He writes another. He's slowing down his own hand, returning the wax to silence. His discipline is a map, guiding the way into the dark. He murmurs another fragment to the fading embers. His voice is barely audible over the low hum of the wind. Loss is nothing else but change. He lets the sentence hang in the air. He allows the profound simplicity of the thought to fill the space. And change is nature's delight. The concept of change loses its sharp edges in the warmth of the tent. It is no longer something to be feared or fought against. It is simply the nature of the river flowing outside the walls. It is the nature of the fire turning wood into ash. It is the nature of the river turning toward the deep, quiet sea. There is a deep comfort in yielding to this natural law. The wooden cot holds the weight of the night without complaint. The world will continue to turn while the body sleeps. The stars will wheel across the freezing northern sky. The guards will walk their measured paces on the wooden palisade. The Emperor will sit by the fire. Everything is exactly as it should be. The scratching of the stylus continues, but the strokes are brief now. They are small, quiet marks in the wax. They are the final, settling thoughts of a disciplined intellect. The shadows in the tent are vast and soft. The amber light has retreated to a small circle around the iron brazier. The rest of the room is draped in a thick, comfortable darkness. The heavy bearskin absorbs the body entirely. The sensation of physical boundaries begins to blur. There is only the heat, the slow breathing, and the sound of the bronze. He sets the stylus down gently on the edge of the wax tablet. He does not pick it up again immediately. He rests his scarred hands over the closed wooden boards. He sits in the absolute quiet. He is observing the stillness of his own mind. He is ensuring that the fortress is secure. He finds no anger there. He finds no anxiety. He finds only the quiet, empty space of a job entirely finished for the day. The silence in the tent is absolute. The wind outside is a constant, distant drone, emphasizing the deep isolation and security of the interior. The breathing of the Emperor is incredibly slow. It is the breathing of a man standing on the very threshold of sleep. The rhythm is ancient. The chest rises and falls with minimal effort. The air is drawn in slowly, held for a brief, peaceful moment and released. The heavy lethargy is complete. The room has stopped searching for something to resist. The amber light has accepted the slow, dark mercy of the embers. There is nothing left to do. There is nowhere left to be. It is a walk down a gentle incline into a dark, quiet valley. The Emperor picks up the stylus one last time. The movement is slow and heavy. He carves a final, deliberate mark into the beeswax. The scratch is quiet, final, and absolute. It is the closing of a door, the sealing of the night against the chaos of the world. He places the bronze tool softly on the wooden table. He closes the hinged wooden boards, protecting the wax and the thoughts within. The quiet click of the wood coming together is a sound of completion. The work is done. The philosophy is recorded. The mind is clear. The heat of the brazier remains a constant, heavy blanket in the dark. The shadows are still. The tent is a perfect, unbreakable sanctuary on the edge of the world. The wooden tablet rests quietly on the table. The bronze stylus is entirely still. The sound of the scratching has faded completely into the heavy fabric of the tent. In its absence, the true depth of the silence is revealed. It is not an empty, hollow silence. It is a thick space filled with the dry heat of the oak coals. The Emperor does not move to open the wax again. The work of the mind is finished. The philosophy has been secured for the night. He leans back slowly in the folding leather chair. The worn material yields to his weight with a low, natural creak. He turns his head toward the heavy entrance flap of the tent. A new sound emerges from the freezing dark outside. It is a slow, methodical sound. Heavy boots pressing into the hardened, frosted earth. The crunch of ice and dirt beneath iron-studded leather. It is the Praetorian Guard, the elite watch of the Roman Empire making their rounds in the deep night. The footsteps are perfectly synchronized. They do not rush. They do not falter. They walk with the absolute certainty of an impenetrable defense. The sound moves slowly past the front of the tent. It is a heavy, rhythmic thud. The iron nails in the soles of their sandals grip the frozen mud. There is a faint, muffled clink of a heavy sword scabbard brushing against a woolen tunic. It is a physical manifestation of order and discipline. The guard passes by, and the footsteps begin to fade down the grid of the camp. They grow fainter with every measured stride, but they do not disappear entirely. They become a low, distant percussion beneath the hum of the Danube wind. A low percussion beneath the hum of the wind. The Emperor listens to the fading footsteps. His face is cast in the deep, dim red of the dying embers. His expression is one of complete, untroubled trust. He knows the men outside the walls. He knows the strength of the timber palisade. He knows the depth of the defensive trenches. There is absolutely nothing in the dark forest that can cross that line. He looks back across the warm space above the brazier. His voice is barely more than a vibration in the quiet air. The watch keeps vigil. The words are slow, heavy, and infinitely calming. You do not have to stand guard tonight. The tent is very still after the words. Outside, the boots continue their slow circuit of the palisade. One full rotation, then another. The Empire is standing guard. The most formidable military force in human history is awake in the cold. The tent holds its warmth without effort. The responsibility of survival has been outsourced to the legions. The emperor sets his hands flat against his knees. He lets the weight of his shoulders release. The folding chair holds. The fur holds. The fire holds. The emperor shifts his weight. He slowly stands from his own folding stool. His movements are stiff with age and the cold of the northern campaigns, but they are entirely deliberate. He does not rush. He gathers the heavy, dark crimson wool of his cloak. He pulls it closer around his broad shoulders. He steps away from the small table. He moves toward the simple wooden cot in the corner of the tent. The cot is covered in thick, undyed blankets and the dense fur of a bear. It is a bed built without vanity. He sits on the edge of the timber frame. The wood gives a low, solid creak. He reaches out and adjusts the heavy folds of the blankets. The air in the tent is incredibly still. The brazier casts its final fading warmth across the packed earth floor. The coals are no longer pulsing with bright light. They are a steady dark red, covered almost entirely in a soft blanket of pale grey ash. They will hold their heat until the dawn. They require no more tending. They are self-sustaining in the quiet dark. The emperor lies back upon the cot. The heavy furs rise up around him. He pulls the thick woolen cloak over his chest, folding his hands together. He stares up at the curved leather ceiling of the tent. The shadows there are deep, vast, and motionless. The silence of the tent is absolute, broken only by the distant wind and the faint returning rhythm of another guard patrol. The footsteps approach again from the far side of the camp, slow, measured, heavy. They pass by the thick calfskin walls, a comforting, repeating metronome. They fade away into the grid of the sleeping tents. The cycle of protection is endless. The emperor does not close his eyes immediately. He breathes in the warm, dry air, scented with oak ash and old leather. He lets the breath out in a long, slow sigh. The sound of his exhalation is the last sound the tent makes. It is the sound of total, complete surrender to the night. The embers have no more to say. Their light is drawn inward. A faint curl of pale smoke rises toward the peak of the tent and disappears. The tent is very still, very warm, very complete. The worries of the day have been left far behind on the frozen road. They are buried under the snow and unable to find their way into the camp. The emperor turns his head slightly on the plain wooden pillow. He looks one last time toward the faint red glow of the fire. His voice is a faint, gravelly whisper, a final thought offered to the quiet dark. The universe is change. The words are incredibly slow, drawn out in the heavy air. Our life is what our thoughts make it. A long, heavy pause follows. The wind hums a low, solitary note outside the leather walls. Sleep. The single word settles over the room like the final fall of ash from a dying coal. He closes his eyes. His breathing immediately drops into a slow, deep, unbroken rhythm. He is asleep. The wisest mind in the world is resting. The man who carries the empire has laid his burden down on the wooden cot. There is absolutely nothing left to do. The tent is dark. The air is warm. The watch is set. The Praetorian Guard continues their slow, heavy march outside in the cold. The wind off the Danube River sweeps across the wooden palisade, but it cannot enter. The quiet inside the tent is a physical weight against the walls, against the earth, against the night. The amber light is gone, leaving only the soft, comforting blackness. The safety of the tent is absolute and unchanging. The long journey is over. The quiet in the tent is absolute. The scratching of the bronze stylus is a memory. The closed wooden tablet rests on the table, holding the ordered thoughts of the emperor. He lies on the simple cot in the corner of the room. His breathing is a slow, heavy tide. It rises and falls with perfect, unbroken regularity. The sound of his breath sets the rhythm for the entire space. It is a slow, grounding anchor in the dark. The heavy, dark crimson cloak covers him entirely. He is completely surrendered to the wooden frame and the dense blankets. The man who carries the weight of the world is at total peace. The iron brazier in the centre of the earth floor is no longer bright. The flames have long since died away. The bright orange coals have cooled. They are now a deep, dull red. They are buried beneath a thick, soft layer of pale grey ash. The ash insulates the remaining heat. It releases the warmth slowly, evenly into the still air. The light they cast is minimal. The shadows on the curved walls have vanished into a single, comfortable darkness. The air in the tent is incredibly dry and warm. It smells of old leather, worn wool, and the fading scent of oak smoke. It is the scent of a safe harbour after a long, freezing voyage. The body resting on the folding wooden stool is entirely supported by the thick bearskin. The fur is dense. The coarse outer hairs give way to an incredibly soft, insulating layer beneath. It rises around the sides, creating a perfect protective layer against the cooling air. The muscles have released their hold. There is no tension in the shoulders. The spine is allowed to curve naturally into the support of the chair. There is no stiffness in the hands. The fingers rest loosely against the heavy wool of the travelling clothes. The earth beneath the tent does not shift. It holds everything placed upon it. The feet are planted firmly on the hard-packed soil. The ground is solid and unmoving. It provides a foundation of absolute stability. Outside the calfskin walls, the night continues its slow turn. The constellations wheel silently over the wooden watchtowers. The freezing wind off the Danube River sweeps across the open ground. It presses against the heavy timber palisade. It hums against the leather roof of the tent. The sound is a low, continuous vibration. It does not threaten the warmth inside. It only deepens the profound sense of shelter. The contrast is absolute. The freezing, chaotic wilderness lies just beyond the trench. The warm and ordered safety exists within these walls. A new sound emerges from the wind. It is the slow, heavy tread of the Praetorian Guard. The iron-studded sandals strike the frozen mud. The frost cracks under the immense weight of the soldiers. The footsteps are measured. They do not rush. They carry the weight of absolute discipline. They approach from the edge of the camp, moving along the perfect grid of the avenues. They pass by the front of the tent. The sound is a low, rhythmic thud, a faint clink of metal against thick wool, the heavy bronze of a shield resting against a leather tunic. It is the sound of the Empire standing watch. The steps fade away down the row of sleeping quarters. They become a distant, muffled percussion. They leave behind a trail of complete security. There is no need to guard the perimeter. The greatest army in the world is awake in the cold. They stand on the walls staring into the dark trees. They hold the line so that the interior can rest. The quiet discipline of the man in the corner has finally surrendered to the dark. The space inside the tent is perfectly, entirely protected. The red glow of the embers dims further. The tent is wrapped in a thick, heavy blackness. The darkness is not empty. It is full of warmth. It is full of safety. The air is thick, slowing the passage of time to a near halt. The hours stretch out into a single continuous moment of peace. There is nowhere left to go. There is nothing left to do. The mind is a quiet, empty room. The anxieties of the day have been left outside on the frozen road. They are buried under the falling snow. They cannot cross the threshold of the tent. The emperor has locked them out with his philosophy. His reasoned words have built an invisible fortress. The breathing in the room remains perfectly synchronized. His breath draws in the dry, warm air of the tent. It releases slowly into the dark. The rhythm does not waver. The body sinks deeper into the heavy fur. The warmth of the brazier settles over the skin like a thick blanket. The night is a vast, calm ocean. The tent is a small, secure boat drifting on the surface. The guard passes by once more, fainter this time, muffled by the heavy layers of approaching sleep. The steady rhythm blends with the beating of the heart. The camp is entirely secure. The embers pulse like a slow heart. The very last of the red light fades into the grey ash. The darkness in the tent is complete and absolute. The air is completely still. The heavy wool and the thick leather trap the residual heat perfectly. The silence is vast and deep. The emperor's breathing is a low, subtle hum in the corner. It is the only human sound remaining in the world. It is steady, unbroken, and immensely calming. The wind off the river grows slightly stronger. It is a constant low-frequency drone, a heavy white noise that washes over the camp. It covers the silence with a thick acoustic blanket. The sound of the wind is ancient. It is the sound of the earth turning in the dark. It carries no demands. It carries no expectations. It simply exists, sweeping across the freezing mud and the dark forests. It brushes against the tops of the pine trees. It ripples across the surface of the black water. Inside the tent, the wind is entirely harmless. It is merely a lullaby played by the northern frontier. The heavy leather of the tent does not flap. It holds its shape, stiffened by the cold outside and the oils worked into the hide. It is a monument to human endurance. The space within is a pocket of preserved time. The minutes pass without measurement. There are no water clocks here. There is no sun to cast a shadow on a dial. There is only the steady, unhurried passage of the dark. The heavy bearskin provides absolute comfort. The physical form feels completely weightless in the dark. The mind has surrendered entirely to the quiet. The thoughts have slowed to a complete stop. The distant footsteps of the guard return. They are barely audible now, a soft rhythmic vibration in the earth, passing by the outer edge of the camp, fading away into the distance, a silent reminder that the watch is eternal. The leather walls hold firm against the wild. The perimeter is unbroken. The Danube wind carries the last thought away. The mind is perfectly clear. The space left behind is filled with a deep, heavy gravity. The body is perfectly aligned with this stillness. The lungs draw the air slowly, matching the slow turning of the night. The heart beats with a calm, resting cadence. The walls of the tent grow distant. The boundaries of the walls slip away. The dark space becomes infinite. The stars are very far away. The air smells of dry earth and cold leather. The warmth of the ash radiates softly. The slow breathing continues. The river wind continues its low, endless drone. A sound that has existed since before the Empire. A sound that will exist long after the wooden palisades have returned to the earth. It is the sound of eternity, and within that eternity there is a perfect, quiet place to rest. The camp of the legions rests under the freezing stars. The emperor sleeps in his simple wooden cot. The night stretches out, endless and secure. There is only the dark. There is only the warmth. There is only the deep, unbroken quiet. The frontier is silent. The world is at peace. The long watch is over and the camp is quiet. If this fire has kept you company through the dark hours, leave a small ember for the traveller who follows. A like, passed forward in the silence. And if you wish to find this fire again, return to Mythic Slumber. Subscribe and the gates will remain open. May your mind remain guarded by reason. May your rest be deep and undisturbed. Good night.